Hello and welcome back to the Summer Studios YouTube channel. In today's video, I am going to be showing you some tools within Maya that you can use to make working on complicated curved shapes and any shape really in Maya much easier for you. So working on single pieces of complex models, whether they're curved or more flat, can feel really daunting, especially if you need to add a lot of detail. It can be frustrating, especially if they're quite complicated. So if you're new or less confident with more complex hard surface modeling, that's entirely okay. It's normal to feel that way because, you know, it is hard, especially if you've not done it a lot. But like I said, there's a few different ways that you can make this a lot easier for yourself and take away a lot of that frustration. So let's get right into it. So I have a part of one of my aeroplane models here, the nose cone specifically, and I'm going to show you how you can use Live Surface and the Quad Draw tool to add in circular details like this on an otherwise very, very curved shape. So one thing that I like to do is I'll create a backup of this. And this is specifically going to act as a base for us to work off of. And then I'm going to go ahead and smooth it maybe once or twice to get much more detail in there. And then I'll just go ahead and hide the original. The reason I'm subdividing this first is because we're going to use this as a guide. Generally, when we're doing hard surface modeling, especially if that's for visual effects, or anything outside of game, but also within game as well, we're going to be working with subdivisions. Typically things are going to get subdivided at render time, but if I just smooth preview this, you can see that now lines up perfectly with our subdivided mesh. And obviously we don't want to subdivide till render time, so that's why I subdivide the guide first, so that it has the correct smoothness and we can match to this later. But if that doesn't quite make sense, it will as we go on. So let's say we wanted to add another whole detail like this one or this one. So what I like to do is I'll just create a cylinder, and this is going to act as our base shape. And you might have figured this out already, but we're going to use booleans. Now booleans can be a little scary sometimes, but this is not going to be the final result, and you'll see how we use this in just a second. So I'm going to create kind of the base shape, and I'm going to make sure that it intersects all the way with our model. You can be a lot more accurate than me. I'm just kind of putting this in here quickly so that I can show you as an example. The shape I'm looking for is the one that's being formed by the intersection of our Boolean object and our base shape. Okay, so I'm then going to select the Boolean object and our base shape. Then I'm going to go and hold down Shift and right click, go to Booleans, and then difference BA, or it could be AB, depends which way you selected things, but for us it's going to be BA. And if I just delete the history, you can see we now have that shape cut into our model. Okay, in similar fashion to the way these other holes are cut in. Obviously the topology doesn't match up. It's created some sort of horrible Boolean artifacts. We've got vertices going everywhere, right? This would never work. If I try and smooth this, my Maya will probably crash. My computer will die. So we need to clean this up. And that's where this guide comes in handy, and we can use Quad Draw. So with this guide selected, I'm going to go ahead and press the magnet icon up here, which is going to turn it into a live surface. Okay. And then we're going to work on top of this original one. It's also a good idea now just to make a backup of that original again, not to work as a guide, but just as a backup for the original in case anything goes wrong, which even if you've got a lot of experience, it sometimes can. It does for me. What I'm then going to do is with this model selected, I'm going to press Control, Shift, and Q to toggle Quad Draw. If you don't want to use the hotkey, you can also come up to Mesh Tools and select Quad Draw from there. But essentially what Quad Draw allows you to do is modify your mesh in kind of a bit more of a free-form sculpting way. So you can select individual edges, faces, and even vertices. And you can see that because we've made our guide the live surface, this is actually sliding around on the surface. Okay. Some of you may have already figured out where this is going. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down Control and Shift, and then you can see that then changes the appearance of this. So the outline of this face is now yellow, and we've got this little X on the mouse. If I click, that's going to go ahead and delete that face. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete some of the faces around the circle, and that can be a little bit scary, but don't worry, don't get too attached to the faces. They'll come back. We're actually going to draw them back in. And we don't have to worry about aligning anything and making sure that we maintain this perfect curvature because we've already got the guide beneath this to do it for us. So what we can start doing, and I like to take my time with this process because it can be a little bit tricky, is if you left click, you can place individual vertices. Yeah, you can see them as these little green dots. And we know that a quad needs at least 4 vertices. Triangle is 2, you know, but to have some kind of face, you need at least 3 vertices, right, to make a triangle, but we're looking for quads. So we're going to add 2. If I now hold down Shift, you can see a face gets highlighted in green. If I left click, that then creates a face. And then we can kind of move some of these parts around. And what we're essentially going to do is through these edges, we're going to build off of those and we're going to make a circular shape around this. So essentially we're rebuilding the mesh with this guide as our guide. And you can see this doesn't like take too much time to block out this shape. It can be a little bit tricky once you start getting into the sides like this, but you can see I'm just placing a few individual vertices at a time. I'm not going too fast. I'm just taking it nice and chill. And sometimes this can take a little bit of trial and error. You might not necessarily know where to place the vertices. You can see here we've got a, what's it called? An n-gon, because we've got more than 4 sides, so we're going to have to fix that. But one way we can fix that is literally just by adding an extra point in the middle, and we'll just have 2 faces there instead. And you can see that's now gone ahead and disrupted the edge flow a little bit, but we'll just move these around. And this is one of the reasons why you want to keep things relatively simple when you can, because it means you can edit stuff like this nice and easily without it taking loads and loads of time. And honestly, this has kind of worked out really, because we sort of want more vertices on these ends anyway. I'm not going to spend loads of time making sure this is nice and tidy, but you get the idea. You can very, very quickly retopologize and create shapes. So this is also a great retopo tool. Whenever you need to retopo things, you know, if you're creating creatures, for example, you can do this in Maya very, very easily using Quad Draw. Okay. Now, what we can do to make this even better is this topology is great. We've got all quads, but it's a little bit uneven. And we're going to get some potentially some weird artifacts just because of the way this is shaped. This is stretching quite far along away from the curvature of the rest of the mesh, right? So if I hold down Shift, I can actually relax some of this topology around here to kind of conform to the shape of this circle, which is exactly what you want, okay? You want the topology all nicely flowing in a direction, changing direction where it needs to. You can even use soft select. If I press B to toggle soft selection like you would any other way, hold down the middle mouse button, drag, you can see you can adjust that as well. So you can actually start selecting an even larger area. So Quad Draw is very, very powerful tool, especially when combined with live surface. And if we come back to just our mesh now and we just isolate that and I go ahead and do a smooth preview, you can see we're not getting any pinching whatsoever. A little bit of some wonky faces here, but that's mainly because I didn't spend a lot of time making sure that these line up. But you can see we can very, very quickly retopper this and add in that hole where we need to. And now if we wanted to, we can go ahead and select these edges, do an extrude, pull that back, you know, maybe straighten that off, reduce the size a little bit, right? And there you go. We've created that hole already. You know, it needs a little bit more cleanup, but we can go ahead and then bevel that edge if Maya will let me. You know, and that's taken us most of the way there, right? If you just spend a little bit more time refining yours so that it actually has even edge distribution and doesn't look lumpy like this, you can see you can really, really quickly create cuts like this into things using Booleans and just cleaning them up really, really quickly with Quad Draw. So that's one method for you. It's certainly not the only method, but it's one that works really well for me. And it's what I used specifically for this nose cone on my airplane, and I also used it on various different parts as well, such as these gun ports down here, and basically all over, just to quickly do this. You block it out, you use Booleans on the guide shapes, make backups as well. You know, we've got this backup just in case we messed it up, yeah, just take your time with it. But you can see you can do that really, really quick. Okay, so the next trick I want to show you is slightly different. We're still using live surface, but the way we're manipulating geometry and the tasks this can be used for is a little bit different. So this looks very, very simple. So forgive that. It's a bit more of a potentially vague example, but I hope you get the idea when this comes through. So let's say this is your curved surface, right? Imagine this is part of an aircraft, car, whatever. And you need to add some kind of detail to this curved shape and you need to conform it to it. Okay. You might be tempted if you're new to, you know, let's say this is your detail and you're like, oh, it's not lining up. You know, I've got this straight line here. Maybe I'm going to go ahead and add a multi-cut. And I'm just going to start moving the vertices around to get those to line up with the surface, but it just takes a while. It doesn't quite look right. You know, maybe you've already got a detail that you like, but you need to make sure that it conforms to the surface, you know, especially if it has a higher density like this. How on earth are you going to do that? Doing that by hand with individual vertices is just going to be horrible. Well, there's a much quicker way to do it. I'm going to select this, right? This stand-in piece. And I am going to toggle live surface again by clicking that little magnet icon up at the top. And you'll notice now that when we select this piece of geometry, Okay, when you select the geometry that you want to modify and snap to this surface, you've now got this little circle around the move tool. So just by using the move tool, the scale tool, nothing actually changes right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it pretty close to the surface, okay? Almost touching, but not quite. You can see there's still a bit of a gap. We don't want it to be perfectly touching. And then I'm going to select the vertex selection mode. You can do this with edge and face as well, I believe, but I just generally prefer vertex. I'm going to select all of the vertices, and I'm just going to move ever so slightly in the Z-axis or whatever axis is facing towards your guide mesh. And I'm just going to pull it really slightly. I'm not looking for a big move. I'm just waiting for this to snap, and bam, it snaps to the surface. Okay, and the reason for that is because you're selecting all of those individual vertices. You've got this live surface selected. So Maya is then automatically snapping those to this live surface. I could then potentially move this around, you know, maybe actually I want it up here. We can then just move it a little bit and then re-snap it. So you can see that live surface is really, really handy. One thing I will say though when you're doing this is you want to make sure that this is a single-sided piece. So this is kind of more of a specific instance on how you can add a flat detail to the surface. Okay, maybe this is some kind of like decal or like surface detail. Maybe you want to build something off of this and this is just the base, right? We could then go ahead and extrude this off and maybe flatten this off like this, but you can see that the curvature follows perfectly because we snapped it to the surface earlier. Okay, and we got that perfect imprint of the cylinder or whatever your surface might be. Generally, you do want your mesh to have some subdivisions already. If we did this with a really, really low res object first, it wouldn't really work, you know, if I were to go ahead and potentially reduce some of these divisions. You know, what if we got rid of all of these and then maybe, you know, every other one of these? Okay, and then try to snap this again and it was a little bit further away. It does still work, but things generally don't work quite as well. You can see that didn't work as well because it was further away. So there are some limitations to this technique, but if you do need to conform some kind of stencil or detail that you've made that's flat before you extrude it and work on it more, this is a very, very good way to do that and snap it cleanly to your curved surfaces. Okay, the final tool I want to take a look at is quite similar to that live surface snapping we just looked at, but it's much, much simpler, though it does have some limitations. So in much the same way, we're going to select our object that we want to transform. In my case, it's this subdivided plane, and then we're going to select our curved surface. I'm now going to come up to deform, okay, and I'm going to click on shrink wrap. And you can see immediately that's now snapped our plane to the surface of our curved surface, to our cylinder. That's a hell of a lot quicker than the way we did it earlier. It didn't need anywhere near as much setup, but you can see that it has slightly changed the shape of the surface a little bit. You can mitigate this somewhat by having the surface closer to the original first, you know, maybe adding a bit of curvature first, but that kind of defeats the point. You can see if I shrink wrap it, in fact, it still has a lot more curvature to it. That's one of the reasons why I don't like to use this tool quite as much, because it tends to deform the surface. I think you get a much cleaner result with doing the live surface snapping, but this is also a quick way if you do need to align something with a surface. You could go ahead and tweak this to get those edges straightened out. The other powerful feature about shrink wrap is that because it's a deformer, it stays attached. It's got a bunch of different settings that you can change as well to modify this even further. The other cool thing is you can actually move it around and it adjusts to the surface. Okay, you can see it does start to get a little bit issues and it deforms further away from the center of where it attached. But this can also be really, really powerful for quickly attaching surfaces to your curved shapes and then modifying them further. So yeah. That's just a couple ways that you can work on more complex, curved hard surface shapes, how you can edit them or work on top of them. I've said it a lot, but you should always be thinking about how you can start simply and gradually, right? Work it up to something more complex. A lot of like how we did with this nose cone, you can see we subdivided this. We just did a simple Boolean. We weren't worried about the topology being nice and clean. But then we did quad draw on top of that, and then we took our time, and then even this, the topology isn't too high density, but you can see that resulted in a nice even mesh without any pinching whatsoever because we took our time and we started simple. So like anything in life really, you want to start small, break down your problems into bite-sized amounts, because then it's much easier to start doing it. If you just imagine you have to do this incredibly complex thing, right? if you just look at this and think, oh, I have to make this, okay, not that it's incredibly complex, but if you know, especially if you're new, if you had to make this from the start, you'd be like, oh, how would I do that? But you can see that by breaking it down simply, you would start without these holes. This would just be a sphere to begin with, and then doing these techniques, you can very, very quickly build up detail. And then it becomes a lot more possible because you're breaking it down into those bite-sized amounts. So take your time, don't worry about it. It's okay to make mistakes, make backups, you can always go back to it, and you'll get there, and you can very quickly do this too. And after doing it a few times, you'll feel a hell of a lot more comfortable and confident doing this the second time, third time, and however many times after that. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. Sorry for the delay. We typically post a video on Monday, but it was my birthday, and I took some time just off of work and to celebrate. So we'll be going back to the normal schedule from next week. But yeah, if you've got any questions at all, please do put those in the comments. Always happy to answer those. And yeah, thank you a lot for watching. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.